Welcome to a Leading Conversations Classic podcast. We've searched through our early episodes to find some of the best just for you. If you've been with us from the beginning, you may have heard some of these. If you haven't, enjoy this classic episode. Welcome to the Leading Conversations podcast, sponsored by the Excel Leadership Network. On each episode, JD Pairing will have conversations with church planting pastors and leaders from around the country. You can learn more about how to connect with Excel at the end of this podcast. Let's join JD now and listen in on this leading conversation.
We are privileged to have with us the great PT, Paul Taylor, with us from Mason, Ohio today. Paul, thanks for being on the podcast on the link today.
Thanks for having me. Honored, JD, always.
Hey, I know a lot about your story, but one thing that hit me, and I really want to ask you to fill in some of the blanks, is I know you were on the fast track for being an NFL player. That was your goal, your desire. You're in college. You're playing at a major college, not Pac-12, UCLA, or anything, but another
yeah,
conference.
Second choice, you know.
And when you came to Christ, that kind of got changed, and you even changed physically. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Changed. Yes, there were physical changes for sure. I was a pretty stereotypical D1 offensive lineman without Christ. A lot of partying. The whole gamut of what you would think of that some of you may or may not have been through. But I think I had multiple gods. Primarily a hedonist was number one, but underneath that were, food, football. I wanted to be a doctor and do a little part-time pre-med too. That two chemistry classes a semester usually doesn't get you into med school. But I probably had 35 pounds of beer and pizza on my body to maintain my 305 playing weight. And I came to Christ December the 4th of 1994. And within 4 weeks, it was the first time we hadn't been to a bowl game. I was a junior, academically a redshirt sophomore. So we had been to the Independence Bowl and won and went 9-3 my redshirt year. Then we beat Ohio State 10-2. My redshirt freshman year when I played, started 8 games that year as a freshman. And then I had my life basically fell apart, get saved radically, and lost 30 pounds over that Christmas break. So I came back, and my coaches were not happy about that. And just simply from caloric intake, I think, I stopped drinking, stopped eating. I watched an infomercial. Some of you may remember this. Those of you who are older, that infomercials are kind of like Instagram ads, but 30 minutes. And there was this lady, if you remember the short blonde haired lady, spiky blonde hair, she would hold piles of rice cakes and carrots and say, you can eat this or you can eat this. I had never heard of a calorie, a fat gram, anything. This is 1993. I see that and I'm going, oh my gosh. So I may have eaten some rice cakes during that Christmas break as well. So I don't know if that contributed to it or not, but yeah. So I actually came back and I was given cases of Ensure, which is really, there were no prepackaged protein drinks back then. None of that. Creatine hadn't even hit the scene. So you just had to eat a lot if you wanted to maintain weight. So my coaches were handing me cases of Ensure. But I knew JD immediately within, I would say, days after coming to Christ that I was called to ministry. I didn't know what that looked like. I just knew that I had to tell people about Jesus. And if the NFL was a platform to give me a voice and a louder voice, and I was all about that. And still had a couple years left in my career after that. And there's a lot of other details that go into it wasn't necessarily that I wouldn't have gone to the NFL. And that summer, 6 months into my journey with Christ, I did a 9-week stint in Colorado Springs with Athletes in Action on a summer project doing slow-mo football. If anybody knows what that is, you dress up in a bunch of crazy outfits. Someone actually just posted a picture from that summer online recently, and I saw myself. You dress up like idiots. You go out in a massively packed park on the 4th of July, and you do everything in slow motion to draw a crowd. People just are looking at you, wondering what's going on. And then you go out and typical Campus Crusade for Christ or what's crew style, you go out and share your faith and do the 4 spiritual laws. So I actually blew out my knee doing that slow motion football.
Wow.
Right after I came to Christ. So here I am 6 months. It was kind of a miraculous story of even my coach was nicknamed Satan, my position coach. And I had these people praying and fasting about leaving for the summer. You didn't leave for the summer if you were a starter. It was just not an option. So for me to be gone the entire summer it was actually a really monumental faith builder for my spiritual journey. Was the coach said, sure, go. Because I said, I had all my data. I'm going to be with 25 athletes from around the nation. We're going to be working and training and prepping and growing spiritually and in leadership. And he's like, yeah, go. And then I tear my knee. So that was a setback. Obviously, it was a bucket handle cartilage tear. For those of you who are into orthopedics, it's at that season. Normally, if you had a major cartilage tear, that's why you got a lot of guys in the NFL with 9-10 surgeries. They just clean it out, come back 3 to 4 weeks, play again, get a total knee replacement by the age of 40. And Colorado State's team doctor, my team doctor and my head coach wanted me to come back, fly back, get the surgery so I'd be ready for the fall. And their team doctor looked at it. I said, I want to stay. I really believe God's called me to be here this entire summer. So they worked together, and they had a new procedure that repaired the cartilage instead of taking it out. And, all these things are just pieces of the story of how God gets you where he wants to get you. And what sometimes looks like a setback is actually a definer in your life. Right. So for me, that was a decision where the doctor said, do you want to walk at age 40 with some cartilage left in your knee? Because I can take this out. You'll have about 20% of your cartilage left. You'll be bone on bone. And by the time you're 40, you're going to need a knee replacement. Or we can repair it. You keep 100% of your cartilage, and you have a 3-month recovery instead of a 3 to 4 week recovery. So I chose the repair, which meant to my administrators and coaches, looked like I chose my health over the team. So that put me my junior year, after starting as a, pre-Christ, moved to tackle to replace a guy who got drafted in the NFL after starting as a freshman. So, everybody's like, you're going to start in the SEC 4 years. You're replacing a guy in the NFL. You're going to the league. So that was derailed by my pre-Christ debauchery and DUIs and arrests and suspensions. Then I come to Christ. God changes my life, and it looks like I'm back on this right track. And then I had this knee injury. Come back from that in October of my junior year. And for the rest of that season, so I missed the first 4 games. And for the rest of that season, my coach held so much resentment that he started a true freshman, took his redshirt year. He wasn't ready to play. And he played 1 series, and then he would put me in. I'd play the rest of the game. And my junior year, I did not have 1 start, but played in 8 games, but have no starts to my credit. So heading into my senior year, I was the smallest starting lineman in the SEC at about 275 pre-camp, and after camp about 265. Made all SEC. Had a great year. Played the best I'd ever played. Was captain. Blah blah blah. And had a couple of agents pursue me and say, "We think you could be a 5th to 7th round pick." Trained for the draft. Got married in the middle of that, and did not get drafted. I got invited to 2 camps, and most people don't understand free agency or camps. If you're not really in it, you're essentially on your own. If you show up, they pay you $1,000 for the weekend tryout, which covers your expenses to get back. I'm a newlywed with no money, knowing I'm called to ministry, and kind of Farrah and I laid out a fleece that if you get drafted, we're going to go for it, and we'll chase it because we think God can open doors through that. We're not going to. I got multiple guys. I got a guy who started next to me for multiple years, chased it forever, played in the XFL, tore his knee, thought he was going to lose his contract, and got on a flight after knee surgery. 48 hours later, got a blood clot and died at 25 years old with 2 little kids, chasing the dream. So I knew I didn't want to do that. And I had an offer to go play in the World League, which is NFL Europe back then. And that Farrah and I talk about it a lot. For those of you who don't know, that's my wife. A lot of you guys know her. I wouldn't say it's a regret, but it was Athletes in Action was really pursuing me to come on staff. We knew we were called to ministry. I swore I'd never be a youth pastor or a pastor, which never swear you're going to tell God, never, ever tell God you're not going to do something, right? So Farrah had grown up with an uncle who was president of Athletes in Action and really said, man, I never dreamed I'd marry a pastor. B, never dreamed I'd marry a pastor. And C, never dreamed I would marry a pastor. But I know I love you and we're going to do this together. And the only thing I will not do is raise individual support, which is pretty funny. As church planters, we all know that it may not be individual support, but you got to raise money to plant a church. So
I think every church planter that we work with at some point in their life said, I'm not going to raise personal support. But you did.
Exactly.
Now your call and commitment went together. And you've talked before about your call to church planting and then this delay period, the space between.
Yeah.
Talk about that, not only then, but how is that entered into your ministry, just that delay period, the time of waiting?
Well, I think I heard that concept first from you, honestly. It was when you were sharing your story, and most of us have heard it. If you're listening to this later on the podcast and you're ever contemplating coming to a discovery center, I was being assessed with my wife and JD at the end of the week. Back then it was a 4-day process and pretty stressful. And we get to the end and it was like this, I'll never forget sitting in Green Lake and hearing JD's story and talking about that and telling the story of Red and telling the story of, being offered the job and then it going away and then having to come back and give the speech and all that, so that season of delay, it really just clicked when you told your story. And I realized that, for me personally, I felt the call to plant a church in 99 during a extended period of fasting and kind of put it on the shelf and tuck that away. And then 2 years later, and some people know this, some may not. It was one of those moments where I was into a water fast, 21 days and just praying about kind of next phase in life. Had never heard a clear call to plant, knew I was called to preach, knew I was an evangelist at heart and didn't know anything. This is 1999 about church planting. Never even heard of it. I was in a large mega church that did not plant churches. They did missions overseas and really didn't do any church planting at all. And so for me, that was kind of revelatory. And I just said, I was reading Rick Warren's book, The Purpose Driven Church, back in the day. And I was reading about his process and he prayed when and where, and God said Orange County. And I said, well, I'm going to do what Rick did. And hopefully it'll be somewhere warm in Southern California like him. And unfortunately, God said Cincinnati, Ohio. And so we just tucked that away. My wife is from this area. We'd lived down south for our first 5 years of marriage. And 2 years after that call to plant, I'm sitting in an interview here in Cincinnati for the second thing I swore I'd never do, be a youth pastor. And at the end of that process, they said, hey, we want to make this a senior staff. We want to hire you. The job offer is yours. We've listened to your tapes. And we want to make this executive position because we believe that you can start a church in 3 to 5 years. We got the first guy who's going to do it in 2 years already on the team. And we drove out of that meeting going, oh my gosh, God's got to be in this now. So you're thinking maybe there's the space between short. It's only 2 years. And, that church still has not planted a church. That was 1999. Mm-hmm. I got there in 2001 and was there for 6 years. And I would say, that 99 to September of 2007 period of delay was extremely difficult in some ways. However, there was no way I should have planted a church 1 second sooner than I did. Not even a day sooner, because I, like most people who've been in that position, was sitting on my back porch the night before launch going, what the bleep am I doing? I'm not a senior pastor. How am I going to do this? What in the world am I thinking? All the lies, all the whispers, all the insecurity, that, by the way, I don't think ever goes away. The enemy is going to lie and attack our identity, attack our call forever. So I think, that for me has always been a theme that I try to remind myself of, JD. In some ways, when you're wired up, and that's what I love also about Excel is the emphasis on knowing who you are, and when you have the strengths that God has given me, the personality type God's given me, it's really, really easy to hit the gas, blow past people, blow through people, and not give a crap about the wake. So I think, what delay does is it allows other people who aren't wired like you to catch up, to catch the vision, to understand where you're going, to give you time to explain it. So I think it continues to serve me well and us well. No one likes COVID. No one likes what we've experienced the last 15 months as a culture. But I believe the delay is helping us prepare for the next season of what God's called us to as an individual church, and be much healthier, much more effective, and better to do some what I would call pruning, and also to do some clarifying. So I think you can always learn in delay. Does it suck? Yeah. I always think about Genesis 40, and man, sitting in a prison, knowing that you didn't do anything to deserve to be there, helping, one guy get out and get back into his old job, and then you're forgotten, So I think everybody can experience that tension that Joseph felt in some ways. So
what do you see as it sounds like the last year or so has been the waiting game, the space between for a lot of us. What do you see happening coming out? And I'm not saying be prophetic, and we're not going to.
Sure. No, I think.
What are your ideas going? Did you look at the church maybe as a whole going forward?
Well, I think we have a unique opportunity. I'm a learner, so I'm always reading. I'm always trying to see what people are saying, and I like to read and hear what people are saying. But I think there's a lot of negative voices about the future of the church, that in person's never coming back to what it was. It's all, if you're not online, and I'm all about a digital strategy. I'm all about, 2 weeks ago we had an entire family talk to our online pastor. They all raised their hand during the prayer of salvation, followed up with them. The mom, the dad, and the 2 teenage kids all got saved. We followed up with them. Man, I'm all about reaching people. So I think that's not going away. We all have to have a dual threat. We got to be able to run and throw, if you want to use the metaphor of a quarterback. We got to be able to hand it off and hit the ground game. You got to be able to throw it in the air game. So I personally see, for those people who have been wise, for those people who have streamlined some things, can survive this. Because depending on who you talk to, there's going to be a lot of churches that don't make it. A lot of churches that have already folded. A lot of opportunities to get a $3 million building for $1 million. I think Driscoll talked to us about that at Accelerate. There's going to be a lot of opportunities, but I think there's a pent up hunger spiritually that only the Church of Jesus Christ can meet. And I think when those we're already seeing it now. We're seeing so many first-time guests just jumping as people get vaccinated, as people, wherever you stand on vax, anti-vax, whatever. I think people are A, they're sick of it. B, they're feeling a little safer if they've gotten the vaccine, at least here in the Midwest context. And they're hungry. They're hungry for the Word of God. They're hungry for community. They're hungry for that thing. Man, I've watched a lot of Zoom videos. I've even experienced some Zoom worship. We've done it over, at the beginning when we were closed from March the 11th till June 11th. We tried it all. And I don't know about you, but the first time I was able to do corporate worship again, and it was just with our staff, and we were all masked up, and there were 40 of us in our chapel, and I just wept. And, yes, I'm a follower of Jesus, but I just believe that, the scriptures hold true, that when people are in the presence of God, and the word of God's going forth, that what Paul said to the church at Corinth is the secrets of your heart will be laid bare. And even the non-believer will say, surely the Lord is among you. So I just feel like I have high expectations. It's going to look different. And I think the final thing I'll say on that, if we've kind of internally, executive team wise, been saying, just like we all have, we're rebuilding this. It's a replant. A third may never come back, but that means we got to reach another third. That means there's just more people to replace them that are new and that weren't going anywhere. And at some point, Jeff Sharp, those of you know our executive, he said it this way: that third may never come back until their life falls apart, until the checks run out from the government, until the marriage falls apart, until whatever it is. And then they might come back. That might be 12 months, 18 months, 3 years from now. But in the meantime, there's a lot of people that are still in all of our communities who are far away from God and just looking for hope. So I'm very optimistic. Is that 12 to 18 months? I don't know. I feel like it's at least here in our context, I think we're 18 months away.
Well, with that in mind, what encouragement would you give to other leaders as you look to the future? I mean, you've had God just bless you guys immensely, but you've also been through a lot. What would you say to leaders right now?
I would say, if you study church history at all, or even modern church history, John Wimber kind of started the Vineyard movement, which was obviously big on the West Coast, but I've got some friends in that movement, and he had a phrase that he used to say, that the way in is the way on. In other words, that what brought you to Christ, what excited you about Jesus, what it was that captivated your heart in the beginning. It's the same thing that if you allow it to and you maintain it, that's going to capture your heart in the end. And I think for us as church planters, it's the same thing we say to everyone during the evangelism talk at the Discovery Center, is like, don't be the dead end. Don't be the cul-de-sac on a Christianity. You can still multiply now. And that maybe your resources are limited, but we planted a church in the middle of the pandemic with a partner organization that these people just kept pursuing us over and over again. And, for years they came to a connection event. They kept just hounding us. And finally, like, well, maybe they could be one of our church plants. And, they built, launched, planted, and did everything during a pandemic when no one in their church planting group didn't launch one other church globally. Wow. And I would say this, you got to have the cojones to keep doing what we know works. And, yes, be wise, of course, but keep reaching the lost, keep church planting, keep putting your money where your mouth is. And I think that coming out of that, and I think that's just, man, be strong and courageous, have courage, take heart. John 16:33, in this world, you will have trouble, but be of good cheer because I have overcome the world. I mean, this pandemic it's just an opportunity, and yes, things look different. Yes, we all have to adjust. We all have to pivot. We all have to make changes, and we might be down in attendance, might be up in, discipleship. We might have to put something on pause, or like you said, JD, that delay, but man, the gospel still works. And as a movement, as brothers and sisters from around the country who were on this call today, or we're listening to it later, because we believe that church planting is the single most effective way to make disciples and win people to Jesus. So I say, man, don't lose that focus, because the daily grind, I'm sure, like all of you, is exhausting. We face more as pastors and church planters in the last 15 months than most pastors walk through in a lifetime, as far as cultural events, things to navigate, do I say anything? Do I not say anything? If I don't say anything, then this group's going to hate me. If I do say something, then this group's going to hate me. If I post something, then I'm going to be canceled. If I don't post something, I'm going to be canceled by the other group, much less an election, much less a pandemic. And I think, my last thing I'll say is, in the middle of all that excitement and being courageous, I know a lot of worn out, exhausted, tired pastors who need to rest. So find out a way to do that, build it into your rhythm, and make sure that someone's pouring back into you.
Wow. Well, I want to thank you personally and for all of us. Thank you for taking the long-term surgery and not the 3-week surgery when you're in college. Thanks for not going to Europe to play football. Thanks for waiting it out to be able to plant, and for your incredible example of generosity and perseverance and cojones and leadership. So thank you so much for what you're doing, and we're going to continue to pray that God would give you continued vision. I'm very grateful for your heart as an evangelist, and we look forward to what God's going to do, and get some rest too. So thank you for being here.
Hey, I appreciate it. Thank you, JD. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining the Leading Conversations podcast. We hope that you found it both helpful and encouraging. At Excel Leadership Network, our focus is on the church planter rather than the church. If you'd like to find out more about us, visit our webpage at excelnetwork.org. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss any future episodes. See you next time with another Leading Conversation.